And now to the revelations that are coming out of a new investigation into America's adoption system. A recent report by Reuters reveals that parents who are unhappy with their adoption are turning to popular online sites like Craigslist, Facebook, and Yahoo in an attempt to find a new home for their adopted children. This private rehoming, as it's been termed, means that Americans are easily transferring guardianship over to virtual strangers they meet on the internet and avoiding the oversight of adoption officials. Children adopted internationally are particularly vulnerable to this rehoming. So to talk more about the adoption issue, I'm joined by Adam Pertman, Executive Director of the Donaldson Adoption Institute. Thank you so much for joining me. First of all, what's the process by which adoptees are tracked, after they come to the United States?
Well, the adoptees are not typically tracked once they come to the United States. Once you adopt a child, they're your child, just as surely as in law, just as surely as you give birth. Now, that said, there are monitoring systems that some countries impose. The children almost always come through an adoption agency, and there are checkups on that sort of thing. So this rehoming phenomenon, as unnerving as it is a rare occurrence and is not part of the system per se. It's very decidedly something that's disturbing that's happening outside of the system.
Sure. And Adam, this report has revealed that international adoptees are especially vulnerable to being rehomed. It seems that more of them are given up versus domestic adoptees. Why is that the case?
This is a little complicated. I'll try to boil it down. Essentially, most adoptions in America are from foster care, which means that there's a system in place to get services, to get help. If an adoption does disrupt, there's a place for the child to go. Infant adoption, baby adoptions, don't occur very often, but generally speaking, those are children who weren't abused or neglected, and unlike international adoptees, they weren't institutionalized. So looking at the population of international adoptees, increasingly, just in the last several years, these are more and more children who are older, who have special needs, who have reactive attachment disorder. So what you see in this rehoming phenomenon is sort of the worst cases of the worst cases. These are people who didn't get the education up front, meaning the families. They can't find the supports to help their children, and they are at wit's end. This is not defending them. They are at wit's end what to do for their children and to integrate them in their families. They don't know where to turn, and so they find drastic measures like this rehoming.
And Adam, legal adoptions are supposed to be handled through the courts, and prospective parents are supposed to be vetted. But can you talk about how parents are really able to get around this oversight?
Sure, and by the way, it's not just in the adoption realm. I mean, you hear of people turning over custody of their child to their aunt, to their uncle, to a good friend while they go out of the country for 3 years. So there are mechanisms, legal mechanisms, to turn over custody of your child. It's a simple power of attorney. It's unfortunately, it is easy, and it's generally just a few paragraphs, and you sign on the dotted line. The problem is that these kids have problems. So when you are turning over the child, even if it's for the best motives, and I'm not saying that it always is, but even if it is, how do you know that the next parents will have the wherewithal to take care of those issues if you could not?
Right. And of course, we know that a lot of these rehoming adoptions are being mediated, if they're being mediated, through online forums. Can you talk about how problematic that really has been in trying to regulate this kind of activity?
Well, this is pretty new. These sorts of activities are not commonplace. Again, they're pretty unusual. They're happening, so we need to address it, but they're pretty unusual. So what we do know is that the internet per se, and I invite people to go to our institute website, adoptioninstitute.org, and we've done the first big report, study, research on the internet's impact on adoption. It's called Untangling the Web, and it's there. And we're going to put out a second-year study in about a month. But the bottom line is that the internet has transformed adoption practice in many, many, many ways. It has transformed many other realms. In our realm, we're talking about vulnerable children, vulnerable families, and what we see with rehoming in a this is not meant to be scary at all, is a warning flag, is a tip of the iceberg. There's lots of stuff going on out there that no one is paying attention to, no one is monitoring, no one is regulating, and this should be the red flag that we say, oh my God, now we know there's an issue and we need to address it, but we need to address it systemically and not just with these relatively few cases, but look at the population, because many families are struggling who never would think to jettison their kid, right? So what are we doing for them? And so this should lead to all of us to look at what are we doing for children, vulnerable children? How do we help them? And this is the warning flag that tells us that there's something to be done.
Yeah, it absolutely seems like the internet is a wild card, but I do appreciate you coming on and sharing your insight. Adam Pertman, Executive Director of the Donaldson Adoption Institute, thank you so much.
My pleasure.